And hey, everybody, God bless you. Welcome to this edition of Kingdom Conversations. I'm here with my incredible friend and brother.
Yes, sir.
Adam Durso. Now, we're normally together in the New York City area.
That's true. You get to come down my way.
More often, but we dragged you up north.
I'm up here. I'm here with you.
And there's no snow.
There's no snow. It is definitely colder. I was very happy that I had my coat on when I came off that plane.
But people think like there's only no snow in like July. But
it's not that bad.
It's not that bad. That's right. Hey, we hope you're doing well, and thank you for dropping by. And go ahead and comment in the comments. Let us know where you're watching from. Tell us what city, what state, what church background you have, or non-church background, whatever your background is. But Kingdom Conversations is just a time where we get together with other leaders in the Christian church to talk about the state of the church. Where are we in history with the church? You know, I always go back to this phrase in the Old Testament about the tribe of Issachar.
Yes.
It said the tribe of Issachar understood the times and knew what to do. Mm-hmm. And that's the call of a leader.
Absolutely.
How do you discern what's happening in culture?
Yep.
And how do you respond to that? And, you know, sometimes people struggle with that because they feel like discerning what's happening in culture and responding to it can be compromised. And certainly we need to be careful of that. We need to be in the world, but not of it.
Yeah.
But our gospel is an incarnational gospel.
100%.
You know,
the problem's not when the boat's in the water. The problem's when the water's in the boat.
Okay,
that's what causes it to sink. And
there
so the boat's meant to be buoyed on the water. It's supposed to float in the water. We have a gospel that is supposed to be contextualized in the midst of culture. We are supposed to impact culture. The problem is when the culture begins to impact us, where now we start to assimilate in a way that is unhealthy and moves us away from a gospel centeredness to a cultural centeredness.
And too much water in the boat sinks.
Boat sinks.
And we've seen that happen, sadly.
Absolutely.
So, but I haven't even done a proper introduction yet. So I need to let you know.
You said I was your friend. That's proper enough for me.
Oh, bless your heart. Other than the fact that we share the same hairstyle, the same notes you're looking at right there. But Adam is the head of Lead NYC. And what is Lead NYC? It is the premier networking leadership organization in the city of New York. And really, I would say that whole tri-state area. Yeah. You go up into Jersey and Connecticut, etc. It draws together literally hundreds of pastors, and not only pastors, ministry leaders, parachurch leaders, business leaders, influencers, and helps coalesce them into effective kingdom relationship and strategy. That is a position that you walk in, as well as walking alongside of a wonderful spiritual father in our generation, Dr. A.R. Bernard, who's been a guest on this show.
There we go.
And who is a dear friend of ours. So why don't you start, give us 1 minute, 2 minutes. We are now, 20 years past 9/11. New York City's been through a lot. Mm-hmm. We're praying for a renaissance in the city, and yet the kingdom is there in the middle of the city. Mm-hmm. Talk to us about Lead NYC and what you see from that vantage point.
Yeah, I mean, we just had our 32nd annual Pastors Prayer Summit, which I remember for years going to as a young pastor, watching you lead worship. We had the second largest Pastors Prayer Summit in the history.
Wow.
We had over 300 pastor leaders with us in January.
Incredible.
Which was absolutely fantastic. And
this, again, all denominations, all races,
ethnicities, cultures, worship styles, expressions. Yeah. And so to see them worship together, see them pray together, see them be vulnerable with each other and break down those walls and those divisions. It was absolutely amazing. And so I get to lead NYC on the shoulders of this 30-year prayer movement. I mean, what had been sowed in tears, I get to now reap in joy. Mm-hmm. And so getting to see the Pastor A.R. Bernards and so many others that had paved the way where indigenous churches were growing in New York. When people were talking about the island of Manhattan and predominantly white churches in that, there are a lot of churches that, especially Black, Brown, Asian, in the boroughs that were growing and seeing tremendous moves of God throughout the last 30 years.
And by the way, not only, how would I say this, not only second or third generation, but oftentimes immigrant churches,
Absolutely.
like African churches,
Absolutely.
right? I mean, you've got a lot Asian churches, first generation.
The prayer culture was shaped by that. The worship culture shaped by that, by a group of people that weren't, from here, but came here. And then they're growing and they're reaching indigenous populations in those communities. And so, as Pastor Bernard would say, all ministry is contextual. And so when we saw that, whether it was the Brooklyn Tabernacle or Allen AME or Christian Cultural Center and so many other examples of it, what we now see as another generation of, you had these fathers, you had these youth ministries that grew, and these young guys who were all praying for a seat at the big boy table, and now they're leading in their space, and these amazing spiritual fathers and gatekeepers who are literally blessing. Elijah had to pick up the mantle from the floor. We've got too many mantles falling instead of being placed on.
Yeah,
we need spiritual fathers that are placing, and that's what we're seeing in New York. We're seeing literally gatekeepers who are saying, "Hey, we know what? We'll be here. We'll walk alongside you, like 2 Kings 2, and we're gonna affirm."
Well, and that requires spiritual sons who are loyal,
yes,
who are humble,
yes,
who are faithful,
yes.
People talk about the cry for spiritual fathers, and it's true. But spiritual fathers are crying for spiritual sons and daughters that are trustworthy, and that could be. And I have to say that you have demonstrated that. I mean, I remember my first memory of interacting with you goes all the way back to the Billy Graham.
Yes,
it was Dr. Billy Graham's last major public meeting that he did, and we were on that committee together.
Yep.
And that's my very first memory of interacting with you personally. And I've seen you walk through all this. So I want to go in a couple different directions. First off, I want to say this, and I just want to speak to you, whoever you are, wherever you are. I've been through painful moments in my journey. I've been through things that were rough and that just, I thought, man, I'm done, and you've walked through some challenging times, some things in your journey that you wish had gone this way or gone that way. Speak to us tonight. How do you keep your heart pure? And how do you keep your heart aligned with the character of Jesus when things don't go the way you want them to go? Because I've seen you do that. You are standing in fantastic success because you have. And I'm sure it wasn't always easy, and I'm sure there were times that stuff was going on under the surface, because that's part of it.
Sure.
But you kept your heart moving. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. So there's somebody today who's going through a disappointment, a business breakup, a divorce, a church split, a medical diagnosis, a problem with their teenager.
Yes.
And they're saying, God, where in the world are you? And we as Christian leaders, we're not immune to that.
We're not immune to that.
So
absolutely,
guide us through that process for your life.
I think that I've had the opportunity to be around tremendous spiritual leaders who have spoken into my life. Not just my dad, who was my senior pastor for 20 years and working with him, but I was close to Dr. David Ireland. I've been close to Pastor A.R. Bernard. I had these men that would hold me accountable. And I had men that I could look up to. Everybody should have a Paul, a Timothy, and a Barnabas.
Come on.
I had men that were like Paul's in my life that would cause me to stretch, and they could call me to account no matter what. I had Timothy's that I could pour my life into, young men and women, and be able to pour what I was learning in leadership and what I was seeing, and be able to travel with them around the globe and pour. But then I had Barnabases. I've got brothers. Yeah. Pastor Matt Thompson in Boston and Jubilee, Pastor Jamal Bernard. I've got a handful that literally can see my worst. And when a leader has no place to be vulnerable, eventually they implode. You have to have a place you can take your armor off.
Yep.
And so in the middle of all of this, I had Pauls I could look up to, and I had Barnabases that I could share and be vulnerable with, because they were willing to weep when I was weeping. They were willing in the midst of hard times to come alongside me and say, you know what, Adam, we're going to be there for you in the middle of this.
And that's not only good advice for a leader, that's good advice for any believer. Find trusted spiritual fathers and mothers that you can, and I, in my life, I've been like you, I think of Pastor Jack Hayford. I
Yes.
think of Pastor Tommy Reed and Dr. David Miner, and people who just touched my life. But then also those brother, sister relationships.
Yes.
And of course, on the Eagles Wings team, I've had people like Stephen and Veronica Jenks and Sue Tenike and Mark and Gabby Passarella and so many others that we've walked together, over the years, and then pouring into that next generation. Mm-hmm. And there's something about that because, and I have to say, I think I've mostly gained that from watching the Jewish community in how there's such an intergenerational aspect to that.
Yes.
And the bar mitzvahs and the bat mitzvahs and always passing on to the next generation.
We serve an intergenerational God.
Come on.
He's the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He doesn't define himself by a single generation. And so when we pour ourselves into other young people, younger leaders, we're not just making them better. We're not just helping them. We're emptying a piece of us out because we were never meant to contain it all. Yep. It's from us that flow rivers of living water. And so if it's got no outlet and it becomes stale, it's like the Dead Sea, right? If it's got no outlet,
just going to say
it's got no outlet, it just gets really salty.
Yeah.
And we know
you
some
float,
people.
You can float on it, but you're going to get stunned by it. Listen, drop in the comments, who are some spiritual fathers and mothers that have impacted your life? Whether personally, pastors, that you've walked with, or leaders, or through books and teaching. Just drop in the comments, who are some leaders that you believe have impacted your life and impacted this generation? But I want to go and finish your thoughts.
So I think the other side of it, besides having people I could look up to and people pour into it and just have those brothers that are in my life, the other part of it is you have to learn to appreciate the journey. Somehow in the middle of it, especially those of us that have a ascent toward a Pentecostal theology, we overestimate the destination and the moment, and we undervalue and underappreciate the journey. And it's in the journey that you find God. David, when he writes Psalms, you find God in the valley of the shadow of death, and he walks with you. You don't know him as your deliverer.
The table is prepared in the presence of my enemies.
And they've got to watch me eat. And so, I think there's something that I learned at the most difficult of times to say, I'm going to appreciate the journey. There's an old song that we used to sing, and he walks with me.
Yeah.
And he talks with me. I'm not going to sing. You're the singer. Certainly not.
Tells me I am his own.
And the joy we share as we
tarry there.
Like there's something about that's been lost in a microwave culture that wants everything instantaneously and everything now. And so we undervalue this journey, where in the journey you understand and learn who God is. And secondly, because we're so fixated on the exit, we miss the opportunity. We're so fixated on the deliverance, we miss the lesson. And so when the Apostle Paul tells the church in Colossae, hey, pray also for me, that a door of opportunity may be open for the gospel, for which I'm in chains. What he's saying is, don't just pray for me to get out of this jail cell. Don't just pray for a key. But I understand that at the intersection of my pain and the gospel is always opportunity.
Yeah.
Because people resonate with your pain.
We just look for bad moments to be over.
Yes.
I want this over.
Yes.
I want this done. I want this fixed. And there's something of maturity in saying, you know what? I'm in this.
Right.
And if I'm in this, there's something I can glean. There's something I can be transformed.
Yes.
I can be transformed by this moment if I fully absorb it. So
how do I know long suffering?
Yeah.
If it's 2 minutes, it's in those places that God, it's in that crucible. It's the silversmith that allows the heat to both melt the silver and the dross to come to the surface until he sees his image in the silver itself. And so I think in that, both having the right people around you, because going through pain and difficulty and isolation is a tactic of the enemy. It's unhealthy. We were never meant to be alone. But the other side of it is, I'm going to understand the journey. As I wake up this morning, God, it may not be everything I want it to be, but if I'm in this place and the righteous lack no good thing, then it's either not for me or it's just not now. Yeah. And I'm going to lean into that.
Yeah. he just mentioned that old song, and he walks with me and he talks with me. Drop in the comments, what's a song that encouraged you? What's a song, some of those old songs in the
Absolutely.
church. And I love the new worship movement. I do, but man, some of those old.
I go back there.
It is well with my soul.
Oh, absolutely. If I'm finding my place, I am more often than not heading back there. And I also learned, I learned from older men of God. He said, when you have no words to articulate how you're feeling, read the Psalms out loud.
Come on.
Because they were prayers.
Yes.
Shout out to you in this new series on the Psalms.
The
Psalms that I was just telling Stephen that I'm going to go through myself.
It's amazing.
I'm dying to lean into on your exposition on this. But I would just read the Psalms out loud and know, okay, God, these are prayers. They're in your words, so they're in alignment with who you are. Mm-hmm. And I don't have verbiage. I don't have language for what I'm feeling. Yeah. But obviously, David didn't know anybody was going to be reading this 4,000, 3,000 years later. He was in a cave somewhere at Adullam, and he's pouring out his heart, and it gets captured. Yep. And God, I'm just going to read this because I've got no language for the pain I'm feeling in this situation.
And I really love that you said it out loud, because there is, I think, something.
Yes.
There's something.
Sometimes you got to hear it.
You've got to hear it. There's that disciplined process where you've got to speak to your soul in these regards. And going back for a moment, and then I want to switch to another area. But, you're talking about the journey, et cetera, et cetera. And I, the farther away we get from an agrarian society, which is pretty much over, right? But it wasn't that 100 years ago, people understood seed time and harvest.
Yes.
People understood waiting for fill in the blank. We wait for nothing.
For nothing.
There is no concept.
We're complaining on the drive-through line.
Exactly.
I can't believe how long this line. We didn't even have to get out the car.
Precisely. And as much as that's not going to go away, that does start to impact the human psyche.
Absolutely.
It impacts our children, and there's that thing of just learning to wait, just learning to be still, right? Be still and know that I am God. So I love all that. Well, listen, I want to shift gears for a moment, and I want to ask you about New York, and I want to ask you about the church. Sadly, tragically, we've seen just this week, a major church network take a huge public hit. Our hearts are broken for that. It's so sad. I guess what I want to ask you is, we are believers.
Yes.
And I have been around you enough. You are a man of faith. You are a man of belief. We're in this thing. Jesus is going to build his church, and the gates of hell are not going to prevail against it. But when we look at this really unprecedented moment in human history, I mean, you can't take COVID and all that's happening on the global geopolitical scale and technology, which I think is the biggest, all of this. I want to ask Adam Durso, what is the church going to look like in 10 years?
I am so hopeful for what God is going to do in the church, particularly in the Northeast. Now, I understand in pockets around the globe, God's doing things. I mean, what I've seen in Asia, what I've seen in Africa, the prayer movement in Ghana is incredible. It's amazing. But in this particular part of the U.S., I believe God is setting up something from the city to upstate New York, up through Connecticut. We had 300 pastors last week show up on a Thursday morning. I'm seeing it in Boston. I'm seeing this New York megalopolis, as they're framing it, from New York up to Boston, out to Philly, down to the Beltway, being poised and ready for a move of God. And yes, there are things that have been shaken. Yes, we were the epicenter of COVID for a long period of time. I mean, we had nights where we were being told that 800 people were dying a night for weeks on end. We were having a 9/11 moment, every week. It was crazy. But I believe with all my heart that we are poised for a move of God in the Northeast in a way that is very unique. Pastors are willing to come together. They are starting to drop the divisions that are at play and say, you know what, I want to be influenced by you. Yes, speak into my life. Because if people can only deliver to the level of which they're exposed, as long as they stay in their silo and don't get out of it, as long as they curate their podcasts and they curate their Pandora, their YouTube channel, they're only rehearing what they want to hear.
Living in an echo chamber.
They live in this echo chamber. We just want to be reinforced with what we already agree on, and we already want to be reinforced with the stuff we already believe. And yet, when we get 300 pastors to get to a pastor's prayer summit, or you get 70 pastors out in the Hamptons to go spend just some time together, guys who have, incredibly influential ministries, saying, hey, you know what, we're going to lean in together, and this matters. The hope is that it's going to really shape the trajectory of what the church is going to look like.
So what I'm hearing from you, and I hope this encourages you. I mean, this will go out all over the world, but I know a lot of our base, a lot of our Eagles Wings, core team is Northeast based. But I think some of the lessons are for any part of in the body of Christ. So what I've heard from you so far is I've heard that you're very hopeful, and that a sign of hope is unity, which of course goes back Psalm 133. Behold, how good and pleasant when brothers dwell together in unity, right?
Command my blessing.
There's a commanded blessing. There's something different that happens
it's
when
unique.
That happens, right?
When that happens.
Yeah, I just felt that.
Yeah.
I just felt a little Holy Ghost on that. So I'm hearing that, but I want you to just step a bit deeper into and it's not a fair question. I didn't give you time to prepare ahead of time. But what you said, there's going to be a move of God. What will that look like? We had the Pensacola moment. We had the Toronto moment. I would say right now we're kind of living a little bit right now still in the Bethel moment. It's been a breeze that's come through. And those things are wonderful, and we love the move of God. But there's that place where we're looking, I think, not for temporary revival,
right,
but for a genuine reformation in our thinking. This is one of the reasons that Dr. A.R. Bernard is, to me, just so profound in his leadership. When he told me the story behind the naming of the church, Christian Cultural Center, this is not, we're not bringing just spirituality. This is an entire culture. This is a center of Christian culture. So what will that look like? What do you think will change? What do you think will be done away with? What do you think will come? And it's okay if you don't know. But what are some of the shiftings that you think will happen in the next decade in what we know as church?
Yeah, Pastor Bernard would say that the prophetic is always both predictive to the future, but analytical to the present.
Correct.
And so when you look at most of the prophets, they weren't only prophesying about this, one day. A lot of it was a call to action and a critique on the culture that what that is.
That's right.
And I think actually, although there may be pockets of worship and there'll be great preaching and anointing and there'll be great prayer movements, I actually think that the thing that is going to mark this next move of God is going to be a unity movement. I think in a season where America may be more polarized than it has ever been before, that the unity of the church, both the Psalm 133, but also the John 17 prayer that Jesus prays, that they'll know they'll know that they're my disciples. There's going to be this unity movement that's going to earmark this move of God. And groups that are even differentiated by denomination, it will be said that it's not just Pentecostal and charismatic versus evangelical and Reformed, or you're Presbyterian and Baptist and I'm this and I'm that.
I'll interrupt you. I'll say even God's going to surprise us. I've just had some incredible meetings with the Greek Orthodox.
Absolutely.
I met with the Archbishop of the Greek Orthodox Church, and they are hungry for the move of God.
One of my good friends in New York leads the young adult movement for the Archdiocese, for Cardinal Dolan. And Colin and I are close friends, and I came in with every bad presupposition into this meeting because of my family background and what I thought about. And I walked out of the meeting thinking, this guy might be more saved than I am. I mean, this guy loves Jesus. And they're reaching young adults in Manhattan and in Brooklyn and the Bronx. And so I think this unifying movement is going to be a movement that is not defined by Protestant or Catholic or Orthodox.
Yeah.
It's going to be defined by a move of God that is heart for him and willingness to put our differences aside in the midst of maybe the most polarizing time in history.
You're reminding me, he's a very, very significant leader in the Jewish community, in and out of the White House regularly, high level leader. And he went with me to a conference in Alabama at Pastor Rusty Nelson's church. My dear friend, Pastor Rusty Nelson. Huge conference. I was speaking. Pastor Sammy Rodriguez was speaking. And I'm sitting there in the front row, and this is essentially a secular Jew. I mean, I think he's not an Orthodox Jew. He's essentially a cultural Jewish background. And he's looking around, and there's African American, Latino, white, not so many Asians in that part, but maybe, but every generation. And he's looking around, and he said, I don't think CNN would ever believe that this is happening. And
that's what's not being televised.
That is what is not.
And that's the problem. It's like the bad press in television before the first time I went to Israel, that this is just a war-torn country and there's bombs going. And then I get off the plane and I'm thinking,
you feel safer than
what
you
is going on here, right? I mean, this is what they're not televising.
Yep.
They're not showing the church. And what better preparation for the day where every tribe and every language is going to sit around the throne. Who are these? John the Revelator is like, who are these people worshiping? And he said, these are those who have come out of great tribulation. Yeah. And they have dipped their robes in the blood of the Lamb, and they have come out. There is a church, there is a move of God that is coming out of this tribulation that is going to dip their robes in the blood of the Lamb. And when people say, who are you? Your first reaction is not going to be, I'm Pentecostal, I'm Catholic, I'm Orthodox, I'm this, I'm that. The first reaction is going to be, I love Jesus. Yeah. I've got a heart for God. Yeah. And that is going to be, I believe, this earmark of what this next wave of what I see coming.
Woo! I hope you feel what I'm feeling. This has been an amazing time with our brother Adam Durso. He's the president of Lead NYC. You're going to want to follow him. He's a significant voice in this generation. He's got incredible discernment and leadership instincts. How do they find you on social?
At Adam Durso. So I'm there. I'd love to follow, hit me up on Instagram.
Durso. And it's right there in the lower third. You can see it there. And brother, we love you. We are so blessed to be on the planet at the same time you are.
I am blessed to be sitting across from you.
Well, we love it. We're going to get you to Israel. We're going to go there together. And we're going to continue working together for his kingdom. So thanks for tuning in. And remember, keep praying for the peace of Jerusalem.